Hello and welcome back YouTube, this is Ginge, and today we're going to be talking about my ultimate DPS build. This is the DPS build that I use for raids and dungeons. It is by far one of the strongest and most ammo efficient builds out there. This build is based around the Starfire Protocol exotic. It will grant you an extra grenade, an extra fusion grenade, and damage while in an empowering rift or inside of a well of radiance will give you a trickle of grenade energy back, allowing you to constantly be spamming grenades as long as you're dealing damage inside of your well. You will also get full rift energy back on getting a fusion grenade kill. So the subclass is set up pretty similar. Now, sometimes, especially if you're doing solo runs, you might want to consider running a healing rift for, like solo dungeon, just so you have like some kind of healing. I run Burst Glide. That's choice, but it is probably the best. You can run either melee. Honestly, I just use these for proccing ignitions on the boss. Adding a little bit of extra scorch. If it's close range, you can use Incinerator to snap pretty easily, and Celestial Fire is better for ranged targets. You could also run Ember of Torches so you can get Radiant. We'll cover that in a second. But the main thing is the Fusion Grenade and the Empowering Rift. We're going to be on Well of Radiance. The main important thing is Touch of Flame, which will give you your fusion grenades the ability to explode twice, dealing massive damage. As far as the fragments are concerned, so the fragments here are pretty basic. It's all about applying extra stacks of Scorch. So we're going to be running Ember of Ashes, an Ember of Char, and then my other fragment that I like to run is Ember of Singeing. This is going to recharge your class ability when scorching targets. Now, this works in long DPS phases where you're going to have to pop multiple empowering rifts during a damage phase, i.e. Golgoroth is my best example. Upon throwing your fusion grenades, you're going to scorch the enemy, allowing your rifts to come back even if you don't get kills. Now, I also use Ember of Searing. This is just for a little bit of extra melee energy and a recovery bump. You could actually run Ember of Torches to give your team Radiant. It's also really good too. And yeah, you could run Heat Rises for additional melee energy if need be. That's up to you. I just like it for a stash. So, let's get on to the mods and weapons. So first things first, the mods here are very basic. You don't need much to really make the build work. The build works mostly on the exotic and the subclass. So as far as the mods are concerned on the build, I run a pretty basic Elemental Well build. Not necessary. The main perk right here is Ashes to Assets, which gives you bonus super energy upon getting grenade final blows. In some content, you can literally build your well back while you're standing in your well, giving you almost like a Phoenix Protocol thing where you can build your well back. Well of Ordnance is just for getting extra grenades, and then we just got a Font of Might on here. You don't really need it for this build, but it's just there. Elemental Ordnance for making wells on getting grenade kills. And then Well of Life for, I would say, the only healing that you really get in the build, especially if you're not running the Healing Rift. If you're running the Empowering, I strongly recommend Well of Life. Just giving you some portion of healing is great. And then lastly, now this season we have Weaken Clear. Now, Weaken Clear is a debuff of 15% equivalent to Divinity. Now, my team and I have actually tested this, and in fights where you would normally use Divinity, if you can hit your crits, Weaken Clear is just as good, and you don't have to take someone out of the DPS for Divinity, you still get fusion grenade spam. So as far as stats are concerned, mobility is kind of irrelevant. We're going to be running tier 10 resilience for the 40% damage reduction, a good amount of recovery, and as high as discipline as you can get. Intellect is going to be the next prioritized stat most of the time, but because of Ash's asset and the low cooldown, it's not really that necessary. And then we just got some strength in here because I like my melees. As far as weapons are concerned, there are 3 main weapons that work with this build. This build revolves around dealing damage to an enemy inside your empowering rift and then damaging with another thing. Okay, for example, the 3 that work are going to be Wither Horde, which does a damage over time when you stick an enemy. Osteostriga, which does the damage over time from its toxic overload. And Anarchy. Now, which ones should you be using? If you're the only person on your team running a Wither Horde effect, Wither Horde is by far the strongest, because it allows you to use rockets or something else. Alright? Now, if, for example, you have multiple of these DPS monsters on your team, you might want to consider running Anarchy or Osteostriga to compensate for that. You know, each pick a different exotic to run. So it goes something like this. You stick the target with Wither Horde, you then debuff them, thanks to Weaken Clear, giving them a 15% debuff. And then you proceed to then shoot your rocket. Now, I like demolitionist weapons in general. They are very good in this chain, and I'll have gameplay showing you how easily you can just keep chaining rockets. So you can use like the Hothead, which you can't get anymore, but that's fine. There are suitable replacements like Bump the Night from Season 17. Also rolls with Chokelip, which has a very good interaction with Gallahorn. So anytime that you're going to be doing a rocket spam with your team, and there's going to be a Gallahorn present, pick one of these 2 rockets. If not, I also use this GL sometimes, mostly because it's got Chokelip and it's kind of fun to just keep reprocking it. Yeah, and then an Osteostriga, you could run like a fusion rifle, and then your rocket, you know, or something like this. You know, where you have like, I typically like having an SMG in case I run out of like my secondary, so I can just keep like shooting at the boss to keep proccing my Starfire protocol. But this build is by far like one of the strongest. I've been using it in all of the dungeons for dealing massive damage. I even tested it in raids as a substitution this season, especially for Divinity. Applying that debuff is great. But this will be still amazing outside of that. I used it in the Seraph Shield Legend for just dealing with high priority targets like the Brig section. It's amazing how easy it is. You just place a rift, stick a target with Wither Horde, switch to your primary, and just start lobbing your grenades and shooting your primary, lobbing more nades. Like I said, if you have like a good rocket to pair with someone running Gallahorn, it's also a very strong setup. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into some gameplay, and we'll see you at the end. So this is an example of a damage phase against Perseus, the final boss of the Spire of the Watcher dungeon. Got a couple of teammates in here with me. We're doing traditional rocket spam. Now, these damage phases are really short, so you really need the high burst damage. Now, granted, I did not hit the best numbers, the most amount of rockets per phase, but it does end up doing quite a bit of damage, and we'll show at the end, like the damage comparisons. I have a teammate in his own well, because wells are kind of bugged against this guy, and they let you deal bonus damage. So for comparison, Sirocco here is running G-Horn Tether Spam, and then my other friend is Soul is running, I believe it's just a rocket spam inside of his own well. But yeah, you'll see at the end like how much damage the build can actually do. It's actually rather insane. But here you go. So as you can see, it's like I pretty much took their numbers combined. Build does amazing. And yeah,